You're listening to the Punisher Waterfowlers, the Union 0430 podcast. Brought to you by Real Geese Decoys, the most technologically advanced silhouette decoy on the market. First Light, the best hunting gear on the planet. Go farther, stay longer. And Ducklander Calls, tradition, education, and quality, built to hunt. Hey everybody, episode 142, and we got a treat for you tonight. We've got Hannah Facey coming to us. This young lady we met at the Toronto Sportsman Show back in March. She had come by our booth. We started talking to her and her boyfriend Brett. And Brett's out of town, so he can't come on the show tonight. So it's just Hannah and I on tonight. So but the really cool thing is that when we met Hannah, she started telling us what she does for her job, and that is she is very much involved in preventing the bird flu. So we'll get into a quick bio and a talk with Hannah. I'm having a real problem saying your name for some reason. I'm just getting all tongue-tied here. But the boys, as you all know, the boys are busy. They're scattered all over the place, so they won't be on. So it'll again be just me with the guests. So Hannah Facey, you know what? It's awesome. Another East Coaster. So the East Coast. Hannah came to us, grew up in Nova Scotia in Pictou County. Done her schooling at Dalhousie, a great school, great university. Done animal science and agriculture at Dal, and then left Dal, moved to Guelph, and got into poultry. What is it called? Poultry nutrition. I never knew that was such a thing.
Yeah, that's a good introduction. Thank you. So I studied poultry nutrition in school, and now I'm working as a service technician in the industry.
Okay.
I see bird flu a lot. It's something that we have to, stay up on, because it affects my job quite heavily.
So animal science, agriculture. So you've always sort of kind of been involved, interested in that side of thing. And then, when you came to Guelph and you zeroed in on your master's, why poultry? Why that side of things when I know it's a very broad spectrum once you get into your master's. So why did you zero in on the poultry side of things?
Yeah, I actually don't come from an agricultural or farming background. Coming out of high school, I didn't really have a very good direction as to where I wanted to go. So I knew I liked animals, so I went into animal science, and then just kind of took the opportunities from there that came. So when I was doing my undergrad, I had an opportunity to do a research project with layers, and then that led into my master's with broilers. It was very much related to what I did in my undergrad.
Okay.
And then, I just followed the opportunities from there. The poultry industry in Canada is booming. It's a pretty big industry, especially here in Ontario. So, that's where
I wanted
landed.
to go back on something because you used this term in your bio when you sent it to me, broilers, and I've never heard that. So could you explain what that is?
Yeah, a broiler is just like a meat chicken.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
they're produced for meat instead of eggs.
okay. So I
Yeah.
didn't know if it was like an institution or a company or something like that. Okay. So graduated, got your master's in poultry nutrition. Now you're a service technician, and I'm guessing one of your biggest jobs, and we can get into all of them, but one of your biggest jobs, which is the reason why we asked you to come on tonight, is to help, I'm guessing, all these chicken farmers in southwestern Ontario and all over Ontario and Canada, I guess, and into the United States. This threat that that we see and that we're hearing a lot of right now with the avian flu.
Yeah. So my job isn't directly related to the bird flu, I guess, but I work very closely with
Right.
chicken producers across the province. So it comes up a lot. So, for example, whenever there's an affected farm in Ontario, there is a zone set up, kind of like a control zone around the
Hmm.
farm, and that restricts any like vehicles or equipment coming in and out, or personnel like myself.
Okay.
So I have to be very careful about like biosecurity, sort of thing, where I'm traveling.
Wow.
So that's
So
mostly how it affects me.
so when you say this, so when you say like vehicles coming in and stuff, so if I've never been to a chicken farm, so I can only assume thousands upon thousands of chickens, right? Um,
Yeah.
so if if a farm becomes contaminated or test positive, whatever it is, and you say this control zone gets this, I'm guessing the farm goes on complete lockdown. I'm guessing everything, like from the mud that could be on your shoes as you're leaving that farm and walking out, everything is you're exposed, I guess, and you could become a carrier. Is it really that sensitive, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, exactly. We have to be very careful. It's part of my job to reduce the risk for our clients, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to make sure you're washing your car. Even the mud on your tires could be a problem. So we don't not only have to wash our cars, but disinfect our cars as well. So we're carrying around like spray bottles of disinfectant with us. Shoes, clothing, all that kind of stuff. Any equipment that we're bringing with us has to be like cleaned and disinfected.
Right.
Um, we actually try to stay out of the control zone entirely unless it's absolutely necessary.
Of course.
I actually, there was a case that popped up in the fall in Ontario, and I actually lived in the control zone. So
Mm.
every time I left the house, I had to go get a car wash and yeah, try to
Oh,
avoid
really?
being on farms. And yeah, yeah,
Um, when we talked at the Toronto Sportsman Show, I can remember Dave and I, when we were talking to you and Brett, we were saying like, it's a concern. We hear about it. And in my experience, we were getting our most of our information from south of the border. We weren't really getting a whole ton of information north of the border, or not a lot of people um, posting about it, I guess, in Canada. And I guess one of the biggest things, the reasons why we wanted you to come on, is that we knew that it is a concern here, but it's not as public, I think, as it is down in the states. Um, can you shed some light on just how, I don't want to say severe, but just how much risk there is with this right now?
yeah. Well, I guess I can go into a little bit about like what bird flu is
Sure.
and
Yeah, please. Yeah.
yeah, so there's two main variants, I guess. What we refer to as bird flu, in relation to the outbreaks that we're seeing now, that's the highly pathogenic avian influenza, so HPAI. There's also a low pathogenic avian influenza, which is kind of similar to our common cold, like it circulates in the populations all the time. It's
Okay.
not really an issue. Um, but yeah, so HPAI is a virus that affects all birds. It's actually endemic in parts of the world like Europe, for example. So it circulates in their population all the time as well.
Okay.
And so it's thought to have come to Canada through Europe, like shorebirds in Europe nesting in the Arctic and then landing in Newfoundland through the East Atlantic Flyway.
Yeah.
And then from there, it can travel across the country down into the US, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, the situation in Canada, there was an outbreak back in 2015 that's talked about a lot. That only lasted about a year before it kind of died down. And then this current outbreak started, I believe it was late 2021, all of 2022, and then basically up until now, we've been dealing with it. Um, so here in Ontario, I did have some stats for you if you would
Awesome.
like.
Yes, please.
Um, yeah, so currently there's about 58 affected domestic flocks across Canada. Um,
Okay.
I think there are currently 2 active cases in Ontario, but 40 domestic flocks since the beginning of the outbreak, so back to 2021 in
Yeah.
Ontario. Nationally, the impact has been much bigger. About 7.6 million birds nationally have died from the virus. 3.6 million have been in BC. That BC has seen the biggest impact. They're the
Yep.
most densely concentrated, I guess, in terms of domestic flocks.
Mm-hmm.
1.4 million were in Alberta, and then here in Ontario, we've had about 800,000 birds affected. And then that's only domestic flocks. That's not considering the wild populations.
Right. I can remember it being on the news about the BC flocks because it was really, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really the first big one in Canada, right? That where the farmers really lost a lot of their flocks. So it was big news. Um and I don't know how you feel about the media, but I'm not a big I think they try to scare the shit out of us all the time. So in that case, they were making a really big deal about the bird flu at that time in BC, and you're saying 7.6 million birds. Now that wasn't all in BC, but 7.6 million birds is an insane amount of birds.
Yeah, and when you consider the situation globally, like I don't think Canada has been nearly as affected as say the US or
Right.
Europe or places like that. Yeah,
So
BC got hit especially hard because they had the flooding before in
right.
2021. So
Yeah.
they had a lot of barns washed out and then they got hit with bird flu.
Oh, so then I'm guessing with the floods and the burns washing out, maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but then that would have increased the uh the spread, I guess, for lack again, right? So with the water and in the burns and flooding and everything, that would have added to the spreading as well on top of it, right? That's
Could
insane.
have, yeah.
That's insane. So you sort of kind of touch on something there when you said, Canada hasn't really been that bad. Now we have a very we have a very big meat chicken population and the egg population, egg producing chickens as well, right? Like that is a major industry in Canada. So it's not like we're small time players. We may not be as big as some of the other countries, but we do have a fairly large industry. Is it some of the restrictions that we so that the government that your places of work and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and all those is that what's keeping us at bay right now, or is there another reason?
Maybe Canada is supply managed for eggs and poultry meat. So
Okay.
yeah, I guess I don't know a lot about the politics behind it or
Right.
how other countries are managed, but yeah, here in Canada, it is a little bit more controlled because of the quota system and the
Okay.
supply management system. So,
Okay.
and I think that's why we're a little small, like the industry's a little bit smaller compared to say the US because we're not
Yeah.
like importing as much, yeah, or exporting.
Okay. 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 Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So okay, so we've got some background on it. Um, hey, don't be hating on Newfoundland if, just because Hannah said that's where the bird flu is coming in from. Don't be hating on Newfoundland. But no, in all seriousness though, you gave us a bit of a background on it. We know some of the stats of what historically has happened in Canada and Ontario, Alberta, BC, those areas. Um, I've seen some pretty disturbing videos coming out of the States of some hunters that they've come on. So a friend of the show, Sean Weaver, who's a very educated man when it comes to birds and all things birds, right? Not just diseases, but all things birds. And we've seen some pretty disturbing videos of Canada geese being infected and just some not pretty video of affected birds. So for anybody that's listening, what are some of the common symptoms that we would see uh, with affected birds?
Yeah, so for wild birds, you're probably most likely to just come across the dead animal.
Yeah,
If you're looking at a sick bird, you're probably most likely to see neurological signs like tremors, or lack of coordination.
yeah,
There are some more subtle symptoms that you would more likely be able to pick up in like a domestic flock. So other symptoms would be lack of energy, movement, or appetite, decreased production, like egg production.
okay.
You could see swelling around the head, neck, and eyes. Um, like respiratory problems, like coughing, gasping for air,
Really?
sneezing. You could see diarrhea. You could see,
So
yeah,
no
just sudden
different than
death.
so all the same symptoms of us if we had the flu.
There's a long list. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is so wild. Because the videos that we've seen, that I've seen anyways, it was a Canada geese, and when you brought up the neurological signs, like the neck on a goose, right? And the neck is just contorted in a way that it's obviously not natural. Um, the goose is just movements that are very sharp and not normal for what a goose would make, right? So that was the weird things that we seen, which were sort of kind of disturbing, right? So, but it's good because I do know that we do have some friends that I did it didn't occur for me, but we did have some friends this past season. Um, they had to they bagged every bird that they shot. They brought it into the wildlife station, and everyone got tested. Now they weren't doing that down here where I am in Kingston, but down in southwestern Ontario, down around Long Point and Lake Erie, they were doing it down there. So um, I'm guessing just because of the sheer number of chicken farmers that are down there, it just a little bit more of a hot zone, I would think. Is that right?
Where are you talking about?
Like Long Point, Port Perry, uh, down around. So, and it like southwest of Hamilton, I guess, like London area, down and around there. I seen some videos of some friends, like when they got their birds, they would bring them in, and they were getting tested by some wildlife biologists and stuff like that. So it's cool to see. It's cool to see that um steps are being taken. I just don't know, which was the reason why we wanted you to come on the show. We just don't know if there's enough attention being given within the poultry industry in Canada. I'm sure it is, but within the hunting community in Canada, I'm not so sure that it's getting the attention that it really should be getting right now.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I do agree. I think the poultry industry is so specialized that we're kind of in our own little bubble. And if you're
Yeah.
in it, you're in it. And if you're not, then yeah, I think the public should definitely be more informed about yeah, the situation and what they can do.
Um, Hannah, what's some, you know, like what can the average person do to try and stop the spread of this without knowing, you know, if there is a hot zone where you are or anything like that. But are there any common things that people could be doing to stop the spread?
Yeah, for sure. Like you mentioned, bringing the birds in to get tested. You should be reporting like any birds that you see out in the wild. You can contact the Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative to make those reports, and I'm sure we
Okay.
can maybe link that somewhere for your
Yeah,
listeners.
absolutely.
Yeah, and then hopefully it goes without saying, but don't touch or consume any sick or dead birds that you find.
Yeah.
Other things for the general public would be just discouraging any like grouping or mingling of wild birds. So you could bring in your bird feeders or bird baths. especially during migration season, like in the spring when it's really
Oh,
a concern.
even songbirds?
Yeah, yeah,
Really?
any
I
bird, any poultry can be affected.
never even thought about it.
Yeah.
Because I've got a pile of feeding bird feeders out in my backyard, so I never even thought about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I have for the general public. I know for hunters, I feel like hunters can play a really important role
Hmm.
in something like this, especially the reporting of it and things like that. So if you're hunting wild birds, any meat that you're harvesting from seemingly healthy birds, make sure you cook well.
Yeah, yeah,
165 degrees Fahrenheit, that will kill the virus in any meat, eggs, or organs that you're cooking. And then store any uncooked meat you have away from cooked and ready to eat foods. And just try to limit like cross in general. So practice
Sorry,
things like
you just cracked up on us. So you said try and limit.
any cross contamination.
Okay, yep,
Yeah, so things like field dressing your birds. If that's not possible, then try to dress your game in a way or in an area away from any wild or domestic birds if you have domestic birds on your property.
yep.
And then double bag any waste, store it in a container with a lid so that wild birds can't get at it. And make sure you're cleaning and disinfecting all of your tools, including your hands, clothes, and shoes, that sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and then yeah, if you are a hunter with domestic poultry on your property, make sure you just take the extra steps to protect them as well. Any biosecurity measures, just like a commercial farm would be taking.
Yep.
So kind of the same deal, keeping outdoor food sources away from your birds, so that you're not drawing in more wild birds to mingle. And then yeah, sanitizing, washing.
Well, I know, yeah, no, all great points, and I hope everybody that's listening, because if you don't know, Hannah, there's like millions and millions of people that listen to this show every week. So, um,
Oh, great.
no, serious, but no, all good points, and I think, um, even without the bird flu, a lot of those points, should be practiced by people anyways, especially when it comes to field dressing and all of that good stuff. But I'm not sure if you heard about it, and I don't know the whole story. Um, but a couple weeks ago, a gentleman's dog had passed away. It was all over social media. Um, I don't know the whole story, and you know the way it is when it comes to social media, you really only ever get one side of it. But there was a gentleman that his dog had died, and he was eating a dead bird, which had the bird flu. Later, when they tested the bird had bird flu, and that's what happened to the dog. So, for the people that are listening, this is a very serious thing, because not only is it the birds that are dying, and in the chicken world, listen, let's face it, the world runs on money, and if a chicken producer is losing half of his flock, and if you're talking 7.6 million birds in Canada, that's an extreme shock to the supply system. I would think. I don't know how many birds are produced in Canada, how many chickens are produced in Canada a year, but 7.6 million seems like a lot of chickens for Canada. So, it it is our responsibility. And you brought up a very good point when you said hunters can have a big role to play in this, because not taking anything away from the average person that's out um, walking trails or doing whatever, but the majority of hunters that are out and they're scouting, and they're checking on birds and watching things, they notice behavioral changes a lot quicker than the average person do. I would think. I think that's a safe assumption to make. So I think that as hunters and outdoors people, um, we do have an important part to play in this, because I think we will pick up on it, um, clear of an expert or somebody that's working in that field. I think a hunter would pick up on it a lot quicker than the average person, correct?
Yeah, I agree.
So, so again, everybody, it is a big thing, and I really don't know how to stress it anymore. But it is such a concern that I can put it to you this way: I'll do what I have to do so that I don't lose my bird hunting season. And that's what scares me, right? I don't want to lose my bird hunting season. I don't want to see farmers lose all their chickens either. But um, from a very selfish point of view, I don't want to lose my bird season. And we seen changes like last year. So I'm not sure if you know about Long Point, that's down around Port Perry and those areas, but it's a, I don't want to say a bird sanctuary because it's one of the best hunting places in Ontario for diver ducks that are coming through. But they, they have feed stations and everything down there that, and they dry in a ton of birds all year long. And last year there was no feed stations because they had to limit the amount of birds that were, like you said, mingling together and hanging out together, right? So that just that alone changed a lot for hunters in that area of Ontario, and uh, I would suspect it affected the our friends south of the border too. So much so, I'm going on a bit of a rant here now because I don't know what if you were aware of it, but even at the beginning of last season, so for American hunters that were coming to Canada to hunt, so we're talking mostly um, American hunters coming into Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and coming in with guides. Well, they weren't allowed to bring back any meat with them. Now, that's sort of kind of silly in my mind because birds don't pay attention to the imaginary line that's our border between Canada and the US. They fly across it north and south all the time. But it was a big enough concern for the American, you know, poultry industry or whoever that they had to put that limit on that, you couldn't bring birds back. If you were harvesting game in Canada, you couldn't bring it back into the States, no matter what you did. It just wasn't allowed. They later changed it, but still, um, it is that much of a concern that they'll change regulations over
Yeah, yeah, you made a lot of good points there in that rant.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that I tend to do that. I tend to do it.
yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about the seriousness of the bird flu. I really want to get into now. I really want to get in because it's really interesting because you said you're just starting your career as a hunter. And I'm really interested um, to know more about your journey, how you got started to where you are today, what your goals are, and stuff like that. So, you sort of touched on it at the beginning. You said you didn't come from a outdoorsy family, agricultural family. You knew you loved animals and stuff, but now the shift into a hunter. I know why you told me in your bio, but can why to draw into becoming a hunter?
Yeah, well, yeah, my family's not a hunting family or into agriculture or anything like that. But yeah, I guess I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I've always enjoyed things like hiking and backcountry camping and things like that. I was always into fishing.
Hmm.
My partner Brett got me really into fishing and ice fishing. Um, so yeah, when I came to Ontario, there's no wild turkeys in Nova Scotia. So when I
No.
came to Ontario, I was like, wow, wild turkeys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, yeah, hunting was just another way for me to enjoy the outdoors. And then through my education, I guess, I also got very interested in like sustainable living,
Hmm.
being able to like provide food for yourself, kind of not that I would ever be able to do it, but living off the grid, that always
Right.
fascinated me. So yeah, when I came to Ontario, I knew I wanted to start hunting. But it was quite the process to go through all of like the courses, getting your license, things like that, getting the equipment. So I'm just starting now. I'm all set up and I'm hoping to get a turkey this weekend, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So so up to this point, this is going to be your first turkey trip. Is Brett a hunter? Has he hunted before, or both he is kind of new in this
Yeah,
together?
yeah. I think first and foremost, Brett's a fisherman, but he certainly
Okay,
has a lot more hunting experience than me. He's
right.
hunted across Canada, basically in Alberta, Nova Scotia, and now in Ontario.
Okay,
Um, so yeah, he's I think more of a big game hunter. Like he's done a
right.
lot of deer hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I want to start in birds, so turkey and waterfowl.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where we're starting here in Ontario.
Well, I'm going to introduce you to a fabulous group of girls, and not far from where you are, Lori Ann Horst, the Canadian Sportswoman Society. They're amazing, amazing group of ladies that are doing it for all the right reasons. Um, so I'm going to introduce you to them because I really do think you should uh, talk to Lorianne and Jamie because I think they're beautiful, wonderful people, and I think the world of them, and I love what they do. But
Yeah, that would be
uh,
fabulous.
but this, whoo boy, like, did you pick two species to go after that are just absolutely can humble you, and turkey and waterfowl, and I don't care what anybody says. For most people, you'll hear. I'm sure you've heard it yourself when you tell people, "Well, I'm going to go out and try and get a turkey," and people go, "Oh, it shouldn't be too hard. There's turkeys everywhere." Yeah, when you're driving around, you see them. When it comes to sitting in the woods, yeah, they'll humble you every time. I haven't been out yet. Dave's been out. He's already got his birds, or got his bird. He haven't got a second one yet, I don't think. But I do. I really want to see how you do on your turkey hunt because I think when you experience that gobble, that first gobble of the morning, um, if you have never felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up, this will be the time that you'll feel it because it is like a feeling you've never experienced ever in your life. Um, anyways, but I really wanted to talk about this because I personally have seen a huge increase in the attention that it's giving, that it's that it's been getting, and that is of your generation. So the 20 somethings that that have this. You know what? I want to be able sustain. I want to know where my food is coming from, as opposed to just blindly going and buying food at the grocery store where you don't know where it was harvested, you don't know where it's coming from, and you know, um, your generation, I think, especially in the hunting world, I think it gets a bad rap, um, because I think people just think, it's young people, and they're too busy with other things and all this stuff. But I do think that there's been a huge resurgence, especially with um, people that are coming from the cities that want to get out and they want to harvest their own food. They want to grow their own food. They want to harvest their own protein, um, for the simple fact that they feel better knowing that they got it and they know where it came from, and not all these harmful things that are being put into it and stuff. So how much I know you said you're hoping like that's one of the reasons, but like, um I guess what I'm saying, is it going to be a completely on a sustainability side of thing, or is it on a sports side of thing, or is it 50-50?
It's a little bit both for me, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hobby that I've enjoyed learning. Like the whole like target shooting and stuff like that. It has been
Yeah, yeah.
enjoyable. But yeah, I think a big draw to it for me is also, harvesting the meat and
Yep.
how are you going to cook it? How are you going to prepare it and all that sort of thing. So,
You
yeah.
want me to give you a hint on turkey, how to cook it?
Yeah.
So this is, and anybody that's listening are probably going to lose their mind when they hear me say this, but fish crisp, cut your turkey breast into strips, roll it in fish crisp, and deep fry it. And I'm telling you,
Okay.
it's it's the best. It it is the fish crisp or chicken batter, and roll your turkey in that and deep fry it, because it is just the best. Now, there's probably a pile of people that's going to listen to this and just absolutely lose their mind and say that I'm doing it all wrong, but that's the best way I like it. So, and if both of yous get one each, that's a lot. There's a lot of meat on a turkey, on a breast of a turkey. So take one breast and try it out and experiment. But I'm sure you'll like with a basket of fries. Oh yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I'll remember that one.
Yeah. Um, I still wanted to keep going, and I wanted, with you new coming into the sport or into the world of hunting, I wanted to pick your brain on things like, what are you seeing, first as a lady coming into the hunting world, as a younger person coming into the hunting world, and somebody that's, for lack, you had no exposure to it whatsoever growing. I don't want to say no exposure. You know what I mean? Like, you were around the outdoors, but you weren't into hunting and stuff growing up.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that, some of the good things that you're seeing with regards to the hunting community, for you as a new hunter?
Um, well, that's kind of a hard question because I feel like I'm
Yeah,
still just getting into it.
yeah, yeah,
But it has been like it's a bigger community, I guess, than I thought it was.
right.
And I think there is a lot of support, especially online, for like women getting into hunting. Um,
The
I
fastest
know
growing
there's
demographic right now.
yeah, there's a lot of brands specifically for women. I
Hmm.
was afraid getting into hunting that I wouldn't be able to find any clothing, any camo,
Right.
anything like that for women. But there's actually quite a lot out there
Yeah.
designed for women.
And I'm
So
looking at your hat too, right? Like that's an Ontario.
TSG, yes.
Yeah, that's an Ontario company. I was hanging out with those girls on Saturday night at the Wald for Hope dinner. So great girls, and the same thing, right? They're putting together a fabulous product, designed specifically for girls, because yeah, I get it. I've got a wife and a daughter, and I know what it's like to try and find hunting clothes for them. So yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I think it's important to have that community too because the sport I think is dominated by men. So,
of course.
even finding guns that fit you properly are challenging. So, yeah, having that community has been very big.
Yeah. Um, do you spend any time on the social media groups, or are you sort of kind of like watching from a distance? Are you involved in the social media groups and stuff like that?
Not really. I definitely say I'm watching from a distance.
Yeah. Okay. I'm really curious, just on the men's side of things, for a group of people that say that we're united as a community, from the male side of things, we're absolutely horrible to one another. Um, well, and we are, especially to new hunters. Everybody forgets that they've had time to learn, and they were mentored and taught certain things, to where now they're very comfortable in their knowledge, and they forget what it was like when they first started. So now when we see teenage kids come on, and not even just teenage kids, even young and older adults that are just starting to get into the hunting world, we see them come on these social media groups and ask questions and get absolutely annihilated because somebody thinks that they should already know. Meanwhile, they're trying to educate themselves by asking the questions and coming to the source of, where they would think they would get the right answers, um, but not getting the answer, and ultimately being made to look like a fool. And I'm just wondering, I find it hard to believe that the women's side would be like that. Um, Women seem to be a little bit more compassionate than what men are. But I was still curious. I didn't know, if there is any of that tension within in the female world, and I hate to have to break it down, right? Like, you hear about it like what, who cares? It should be just whatever, but there is a line for some reason, and it will always, I think it'll always be, um, female hunters and male hunters, especially for new hunters, especially for females, I think, because there is uh, that worry, like you said, it's a male dominated world, but there is that worry of, well, do I know enough? Am I going to be made fun of? Am I going to be, ridiculed or whatever like that? So I'm really curious because I think that, and I know the women hunting world is the fastest growing demographic right now, and I want to see that continue to grow because it's only good for the sport the more people that we have in it, um, and I want to see it continue to grow. If that makes sense. That's a good rant. Um,
Yeah, I think
but
you definitely feel that tension. For sure. I'm lucky to have somebody like Brett who has experience with hunting and can
right.
kind of walk me through it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think, like I said, I'm not that active on social media,
Right.
haven't personally seen any of that, but I think there are a lot of good platforms, like even the Toronto Sportsman Show, like YouTube videos, your own podcast. Like there's so many other outlets that are trying to spread information for
Yeah.
new hunters. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that you can see that on the internet.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
it again, it is what it is, and all we can try and do is educate and push the good word out on our own, and try and advocate for these good things, right? But at the end of the day, we can't control everybody, and that's just the human side of things. Hannah,
Yeah.
um, you know, a great show. We're usually another 5 to 10 minutes longer, before we cut it off. But I wanted to give you a chance because I've been going on some pretty long rants here, chatting and stuff. I wanted to give you a chance to to do some talking, on whatever, if it's bird flu, if it's women in the hunting world, or whatever. I wanted to give you an opportunity to try to have a few minutes for yourself to speak about something if you want to, um, and just turn the mic over to you and let you go. So without putting you on the spot and putting any pressure on you, go.
Sure. Yeah. Well, going back to bird flu, there has been some recent articles in the news lately, that I have been reading that are kind of interesting. So, back in 2015, when we had the outbreak, of bird flu, there was a vaccine developed. It wasn't trialed, it wasn't used, but it was developed. So recently, I've been seeing articles of that vaccine being trialed, over in Europe
Oh,
and then now in the U.S.
oh,
So that's been very big news. You mentioned, the bird flu being found in mammals, which I think there was, I don't want to say the word fear mongering, but a little bit of
yeah,
that in the media, in terms of having it, tested positive in mammals,
right.
and potentially transferring to humans. Personally, I still think that risk is fairly low, but it's good news now that we're seeing the vaccine, come at least for the poultry industry.
Um, Silly question. How is the vaccine administered?
Um, that's a good question. I'm not too sure. Typically, for domestic flocks, vaccines are administered through either water or spray,
Okay. Yeah.
or they can be administered in ovo, to the eggs.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Because yeah, like there's not 100 people with syringes going around and shooting up chickens, right? Like that would,
right, yeah.
yeah.
And then in the wild populations, they could also like drop vaccines. I know here in Ontario, they're dropping rabies vaccines, for
Oh, really?
mammals. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah. So there's programs like that, for wild populations.
Okay. Um, I cut you off while you were talking, but you brought up something else, and it'll come to me. So keep talking, and I'll interrupt you again. That's sort of kind of my gig. Um, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's really all I had on the bird flu, I think. You did mention, supply chain earlier, and that was a really good point. Um, I think birds especially in the domestic poultry side of things, birds with a longer life cycle, like layers, broiler breeders, turkeys, things like that, are a lot more affected. So a lot of people will probably relate to increasing egg prices in your grocery store.
Yep.
Um, I can't say that's all due to AI, but it certainly plays a role in supply chain. We're definitely
Of
going to
course.
be feeling that in the supply chain for a while to come, I think.
Yeah, a very good point. And I'll say this to it that um for the Canadians that are listening, um, and you're complaining about the egg prices. Talking to Bobby Hayes down in Kansas, our eggs are cheaper than what they are in the States right now, or in at least in Kansas, anyways. So, yeah, it is a thing. It's happening, and we're going to feel it. Um, and there's a lot of trickle down effects with all of this too, right? Like with this supply and demand sort of deal. So chicken, I can't remember the stat. I was told the stat how many chickens are needed, I guess, in the United States on a monthly basis, and it's a staggering amount, obviously. Um, but it just goes to show that that is such a boiling point, right? Like it's a pressure cooker that the littlest thing could really, really damage that supply chain, right? That chicken, that poultry, turkey, chicken, duck, whatever. That's a pressure cooker, right? And the littlest thing could really upset that. And then and that's where I'm getting at with all these. There's a ton of trickle down effects that'll be caused by that, feed and corn and all of this other stuff. So, um, man, I think I was ignorant and not realizing just how big a deal it was until I not that I've dug a ton into it. I've read a bit about it, but I was fairly ignorant and just how big a deal this is. And again, which is the reason why we really wanted you to come on and talk to us about it, because I think I really do think people need to know just how serious it is, and it's not just um this show is relates to waterfowl hunters, so it's not just the ducks and the geese, right? Like it's that whole poultry industry, which is really the biggest, the most susceptible, I guess is the right term, right? Would be the chicken farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely the most at risk with, yeah,
Yeah.
domestic poultry. Any domestic poultry, like backyard flocks too, are at a huge risk. And then, yeah, also any carnivores like eagles, owls, hawks, that kind of thing.
Wow. Actually, that's a good thing. So we're seeing more and more and more people with backyard chicken coops.
Yeah,
Um, like we're seeing, like it's a lot. We didn't have them when I grew up, but my friends had chickens growing up, and I hated the friggin' things. They were messy. The chicken coops were horrible, and he had to go in and clean them and stuff like that. It was absolutely nasty. So I'll never raise chickens because I know how much work goes into it. But um, I know all of these people that are in the industry, they have some pretty strict regulations that they have to adhere to and stuff like this. But then when you talk about the average, you know, dude that's living down the street that has a chicken coop in his backyard, like, is there really any regulations that couple, that man, that woman has to follow that you're aware of?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, in Canada, it is mandatory to report if you have AI or bird flu. But yeah, for the average backyard poultry producer, like you don't know how many are
Yeah,
just letting their flocks die or get sick or are
yeah.
actually reporting it or getting a vet involved or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge to monitor that kind of situation.
Man, I never even thought about that, because I would think that there is a very strong possibility that someone would not even know what they're looking at and just be like, well, chickens died, so, and just throw it in a glad bag and turf it, right? Because that's a strong
Exactly. Yeah.
possibility that could be happening. That's insane. I never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah, I'm going to tell you, we screw around on this show a lot, and I'm going to tell you, it was good to have a smart person on for once. Not taking anything away from any previous guests, but you're obviously the smartest that's been on. So I
Well,
can't
thank you.
thank I can't thank you enough for coming on. And sorry about the break in communication there. I was down south and stuff, and Dave's on fire calls every single day. So um, I can't thank you enough for coming on and helping us spread this. And I'd love for you to come on again. And don't wait for an invite when you think there's something that's in your world that should be talked about. You have my contact number now. You can just reach out to me and say, hey, I think we should do a show because this really needs to get some attention. Would love to have you come back on again.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, this was great. I really appreciate you having me on. I think you have a really good platform here for keeping the community informed and engaged. So, yeah, thank you again very
No,
much.
thank you so much. Everybody, Hannah Facey, the smartest person ever on the Union 0430. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, just a great episode. Everybody, this was episode 142 of the Union 0430. As always, we are not experts. We don't pretend to be. We are just a bunch of people that love hunting and love one another's company. Until next time, big love and be nice to one another.